Friends, today's true story will not only surprise you, but also raise your awareness. A well-known senior doctor at a private clinic did something absolutely disgraceful during a routine checkup of a 5-month pregnant woman. What he did will shock and anger you. But the story doesn't end there. What this pregnant woman did afterward, and what eventually happened to that doctor, will truly open your eyes. So, make sure to watch the video till the very end, because this isn't just a story, it's a lesson. If you find the video meaningful, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss another important story like this. Let's get started. The sky that morning was overcast, heavy with humidity, as Emily stepped off the city bus and walked toward the Midtown Women's Health Center. At 5 months pregnant, the 27-year-old held a small purse containing her prenatal booklet and a bottle of water. Her steps were cautious but steady. She had heard about this clinic from her neighbor, who insisted the doctor here was one of the best in town, a respected obstetrician with years of experience in the latest equipment. Emily had been visiting the local free clinic for her monthly checkups, but this time she wanted reassurance from someone more professional. At the entrance, a young receptionist greeted her. "Here for your monthly checkup, Mom." "Yes, just routine," Emily answered with a polite smile. She filled out the intake forms and waited for nearly an hour before her name was called. "Miss Emily Hassan, please proceed to exam room 2. Inside the exam room, a middle-aged man in a pristine white coat sat behind a desk. He looked calm, confident. "Good afternoon, Miss Hassan," he said with a professional smile. "Please have a seat." "Good afternoon, doctor," she replied, carefully lowering herself into the chair. Her back had been sore lately from the growing weight of her baby. "Any issues?" he asked, flipping through her chart. "No, just a regular visit. It's my first pregnancy." He nodded, then gestured toward the exam table. "Let's take a look at the baby. You can lie down over there. Please remove your lower garments and cover yourself with this cloth." Emily took the drape, walked into the curtained-off corner of the room, and hesitated briefly. It wasn't her first time being examined, but she was used to having a nurse or technician present. Here, the doctor was alone. She lay down, covered herself, and tried to relax. The doctor returned with a portable ultrasound device and clear gel. "This gel helps the machine detect the baby's movement more accurately," he explained. At first, everything seemed normal. Cold gel on her belly, the probe moving gently. But gradually she noticed the doctor's hand drifting downward, touching areas that had nothing to do with an ultrasound. Her body stiffened. "Is that part of the exam?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "Don't worry, just checking the baby's position. Don't tense up," the doctor murmured. Emily clenched the sides of the table, her breath quickening. She had never experienced anything like this before, not even with her old OB-GYN. Suddenly, the hand moved further, touching places that made her flinch. Without warning, she yanked the drape up and swatted his hand away. "Doctor, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling. The doctor raised his eyebrows, unfazed. "Checking fetal positioning. Sometimes a manual exam is necessary." "But why did you touch me there?" Emily quickly sat up, pulling her clothes back on with shaking hands. Her face flushed, not with embarrassment, but with anger. "I'm leaving," she said, bolting upright. Before she could reach the door, the doctor stepped closer. "Miss Hassan, let's not create a misunderstanding. Misinterpretation could cause unnecessary panic. You wouldn't want that, would you?" Emily froze. It was a subtle threat. She wasn't stupid. She knew the difference between a clinical touch and something that violated her. She rushed out of the room. In the waiting area, heads turned as she made a beeline for the restroom. She locked herself in, slid to the floor, and wept silently. She felt filthy, betrayed. She was a wife and an expectant mother, and a man who was supposed to care for her and her baby had stripped away her dignity with surgical precision. That evening, Emily returned home, pale and shaken. Her husband Amir, a local police officer, had just gotten off shift. He found her sitting in silence on the porch. "What's wrong? You've been crying." She met his eyes and tears spilled down her cheeks once more. "Amir, something happened. The doctor, he touched me inappropriately." Amir stood abruptly, fist tightening. What? She nodded. "He said not to tell anyone, that people might misunderstand." The warmth of the evening vanished in an instant. Rage stormed through Amir's chest, tempered only by his need to comfort her. "You did nothing wrong, Emily. You're a victim, and we will not stay silent. But he's well known. Famous. What if no one believes me?" Amir grasped her hand tightly. "You have me, and I'm not letting him get away with this." And that, Emily would realize later, was only the beginning. That night, rain poured hard against the roof of their small apartment on the south side of Chicago. The living room lights were dim, casting long shadows on the walls. Emily sat curled on the couch, holding her prenatal booklet like a piece of evidence. Something that should have represented life, but now felt like a memory of violation. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Her mind replayed the moment over and over. Amir stood nearby, still in his police uniform, his hat flung on the coffee table. His hands were clenched, jaw tight. It wasn't just anger, it was heartbreak. He had sworn to protect the people of the city, but now he couldn't protect the one person he loved most from something so cruel. "I'm filing a report tonight," he said quietly but firmly. Emily looked up in alarm. "No, Amir, please, I'm scared. He has connections, patience, influence. What if people say I'm lying?" Amir sat beside her, holding her hand. "Emily, listen to me. You're not to blame. He took advantage of your trust, and if we stay silent, he might do it again, to other women." Her lips quivered. "I feel dirty, Amir." His hand, the way he touched me. Her voice broke. Amir pulled her into a tight embrace. "You're not dirty. His mind is. You're my wife, the mother of our child, and I will protect you. We're not letting him get away with this." The next morning, Amir requested emergency leave from his department. He didn't give details, just said it was personal. Then, with his wife by his side, he went straight to a public clinic known for its integrity. There, a female doctor conducted a full psychological and physical exam. There were no external injuries, but her notes reflected something equally significant: deep psychological trauma. "This alone," the doctor said gently, "is admissible as evidence, especially when corroborated with testimony." From there, Amir and Emily went to the police department's Special Victims Unit. Amir met with one of his old academy friends, Officer Miles Carter, now a senior investigator. "I'm not here as a cop, Miles. I'm here as a husband. My wife was assaulted," Amir said firmly. Miles' expression turned serious. "I'll help, but you know we need more than just her word. She has to give a formal statement." Amir turned to Emily. Her face was pale, but her eyes carried a new weight, something between fear and resolve. She nodded. "I'll do it." The officers filed her statement. It was long, emotional, and raw. Miles didn't interrupt once. At the end, he quietly slid the paper across the desk. "We'll start the investigation immediately." By the evening, whispers had already begun. Within the neighborhood moms group Emily used to attend, people were murmuring, "Did you hear what happened at the Midtown clinic? They say Dr. Carter touched her." "No way, he's so polite. My cousin swears by him." "Sometimes it's the polite ones." Emily felt the walls closing in. She wanted to back out, but then her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Ms. Emily, I heard what happened to you. I went to that same clinic. Something weird happened to me too." I never had the courage to say anything, but thank you for speaking up. She stared at the screen, breath catching in her throat. She wasn't alone. 3 days later, Amir, now back in uniform, returned to the clinic, this time with a warrant in hand. Alongside 2 detectives and a forensic team, he marched to the reception desk. "We have authorization to inspect this facility," Amir said flatly, holding up the document. The receptionist's face turned pale. "Dr. Carter isn't here today. He took a sudden leave yesterday." "We're still going in," Amir replied. They entered the examination rooms. Everything looked clean. Too clean. Sterile. Perfect. But Amir's trained eyes spotted something behind a bookshelf, a tiny concealed security camera. He called in the tech unit. Hidden behind a cabinet was a DVR with local footage. Most files had been erased, but one clip from 2 weeks prior remained. The officers gathered around as the technician played it. A young woman sat nervously on the exam table. Dr. Carter entered and began a routine check. But then his hands wandered. The girl flinched but didn't move. She was clearly uncomfortable. The team watched in silence. "That's enough," Amir finally said. "Secure the footage. We've got our starting point." That night, Emily sat in their living room when the doorbell rang. A young woman stood outside, nervous, teary-eyed. "Hi, my name's Ela. I saw your name on the news. I think I was one of his victims, too." Emily's heart twisted. She invited the girl inside. Ela sat down, clutching her bag like a shield. "I was 19. It was my first appointment alone. He told me not to tell anyone what happened. I thought, maybe I was overreacting, but when I heard your story, I knew I wasn't." Emily took her hand. "You're not alone, Ela. Not anymore." Ela burst into tears. Thank you for speaking up." Emily held her close, feeling something shift deep inside her. Pain, yes, but also purpose. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was theirs. And it was just beginning. By the end of the week, the investigation had quietly exploded into something much bigger than Emily or Amir had ever anticipated. News of the hidden camera footage leaked to a local journalist named Maya Ken, a sharp, passionate reporter who had spent her career covering women's rights and systemic abuse. Within 24 hours, her report titled "Trust Betrayed: Hidden Trauma Inside a Respected Clinic" was trending on social media. Hashtags like #Justice for Emily and #Stop Medical Abuse began circulating rapidly. As the story gained traction, something unexpected happened. Dozens of women started coming forward. Emily's phone buzzed nonstop. "Emily, I don't know if you remember me, but I went to that same clinic last year. I always felt something was wrong, but I blamed myself. Thank you for speaking. I never told anyone, but now I think I can. He hurt me too. I'm ready to testify." Amir sat at the dining table each night, reviewing statements and assembling a case file thicker than any he'd ever handled. He worked alongside the department's Family Protection Unit and several female detectives who were emotionally invested in the case, but it wasn't all support. One night, a message came to Emily's inbox from a private number. "Stop now. You're ruining a good man's life." Another message was more direct. "If your husband weren't a cop, you'd be dead already." Her hands trembled as she read. Tears welled in her eyes. But she no longer collapsed under pressure. She took screenshots and handed them to Amir. "These are threats," she said. "We report them." Amir nodded. And will increase your security. They won't touch you. Still, every day was a war. Between fear and resolve, silence and truth. The district attorney's office assigned 2 prosecutors to the case. Meanwhile, the clinic came under fire. Community outrage intensified. Protesters gathered outside the Midtown Women's Health Center with signs that read, "Patients, not victims." "Your license doesn't make you God." "We believe Emily." Emily stayed home most days, physically and emotionally drained. But something kept her going. Ela visited often now, sitting with her over tea, sometimes in silence, sometimes with stories. "I thought I was broken forever," Ela whispered once. "But watching you speak out, I feel like I'm getting a piece of myself back." Emily reached over and held her hand. "You're not broken. None of us are. We were hurt, but we're healing." Then came the turning point. A former nurse from the clinic, Tessa Johnson, walked into the police station unannounced. She held a flash drive and a handwritten journal. "I should have come forward sooner," she told Amir. "I saw things. I stayed silent because I was scared. But now, I can't live with myself if I don't say something." Inside the drive were secretly recorded audio files. Tessa had begun to suspect Dr. Carter years ago and had recorded interactions on her phone. One clip was particularly damning. Dr. Carter's voice. "You're not going to say anything, right? I'm a doctor. You're just a girl. You talk. You ruin your own life." Amir clenched his jaw as he played it. "This changes everything," he said. "Now it's no longer just testimony. This is predatory behavior. On tape." The audio was quickly submitted to the district attorney and added to the case file. Meanwhile, Emily received an official subpoena. She was going to testify. The night before the hearing, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window while Amir brewed tea. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. She looked up, eyes rimmed with fatigue, but filled with fire. "Number, but I'm going anyway." The next morning, the courthouse was surrounded by media vans and protesters. Inside, the courtroom filled quickly. Press community activists, medical board officials, even college students studying public health law. Dr. Carter sat at the defense table, dressed in a gray suit. Gone was the white coat. Gone was the calm demeanor. He looked tired, disoriented, even angry. Emily was called to the stand. As she walked up, the room hushed. She took her oath. "My name is Emily Hassan. I was assaulted during what was supposed to be a routine prenatal exam." Her voice trembled at first, but then she found her footing. She described everything. The moment she entered the clinic, the unease, the touch, the violation. The courtroom sat in dead silence. And when I pulled away and questioned him, he told me not to talk, that people would misunderstand, that if I spoke up, I'd cause unnecessary panic. He made me feel like I was the one doing something wrong. But I wasn't. He was. A tear rolled down her cheek. But she stood tall. "I came here to say that what happened to me wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was abuse, and I will not be silent anymore." Illa, watching from the bench, burst into tears. Tessa held her hand. The judge nodded toward the jury. "We thank the witness. Court will reconvene tomorrow for the remaining testimonies." Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. But Emily kept walking, straight, proud, and steady. Because now the world knew, and there was no turning back. The second day of testimony saw more women take the stand. Ela, her hands visibly shaking, stepped into the witness box with a calm that surprised even herself. "I was 19, she began. I didn't have insurance, so I went to Midtown Clinic because it was affordable. I thought I was just getting a prenatal checkup. But I left with something broken in me. She described the inappropriate touch. The doctor's voice trying to calm her while violating her trust. How she left the clinic crying, without ever telling anyone. I didn't think anyone would believe me. But when I saw Emily on the news, I realized I wasn't alone. I realized I had to speak too. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The jury listened intently. The judge's face was stiff with emotion. Then the prosecution played Tessa's secret recording. The courtroom froze. Dr. Carter's voice echoed across the chamber. "If you say anything, no one will believe you. I'm the doctor. You're just a girl." It was the sound of power abused, of arrogance, entitlement, and cruelty. Dr. Carter's lawyer tried to object, but the judge overruled. The defense scrambled to salvage their case. They brought in character witnesses, former patients who described Dr. Carter as professional and kind. They claimed it was all a misunderstanding, a witch hunt, a moment of mass hysteria. But the truth had already taken root. An expert trauma psychologist testified, explaining the survivors' delayed reporting and fragmented memories. Victims of sexual abuse, especially when committed under the guise of medical care, often dissociate during the event. This isn't inconsistency, it's survival. In the hallways outside the courtroom, women who had never met embraced like long-lost sisters. Dozens more were ready to testify if needed. Community leaders, religious organizations, and civil rights groups rallied behind them. Amir remained at Emily's side every single day. The once soft-spoken mother-to-be was now hailed as a symbol of courage, but she wasn't driven by recognition. "I didn't do this to be brave," she told Maya, the reporter. "I did this so that no one else would feel like I did, dirty, helpless, ashamed of something that wasn't my fault." The final day of the trial arrived with heavy anticipation. The courtroom was packed. Media vans were parked outside. Supporters wore teal ribbons in solidarity with survivors of sexual abuse. Dr. Carter, now visibly worn, avoided eye contact with everyone. His arrogance had faded into panic. The judge called the courtroom to order. The foreperson of the jury stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Dr. Christopher Carter, guilty on all counts." Gasps filled the room. A few people sobbed. Emily closed her eyes as tears fell down her cheeks. Not from pain, but from relief. Ila clutched her hand tightly. Amir wrapped an arm around his wife's shoulders. The judge continued, "For multiple counts of sexual misconduct, abuse of authority, and obstruction of justice, this court sentences the defendant to 8 years in state prison, permanent revocation of his medical license, and mandatory financial restitution to the victims." Dr. Carter collapsed into his seat. His world had finally crumbled. Outside, Emily stood before a sea of cameras and microphones. She had no speech prepared, but her voice was clear. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about safety, about dignity, and about making sure this never happens again. Over the following weeks, Emily received letters, flowers, and messages of gratitude from women across the country. Some had stories to share. Others simply said, "Thank you." She formed a small support group with Ayla, Tessa, and a few others. They named it Silent No More. Together they visited schools, clinics, and mosques to speak about consent, trust, and courage. Emily wasn't just a survivor anymore. She'd become a guide for others still trapped in silence. Months later, Emily stood before a room full of medical students at a conference on ethics and patient safety. Her belly had grown. She was nearing delivery. She looked radiant. "I don't remember everything about that day," she said, But I'll never forget how small I felt. I stand here now not to relive it, but to remind you. Never misuse the power you're given. As the audience rose in applause, Amir watched from the back, his eyes full of pride. 2 weeks later, their baby boy was born, healthy, strong. They named him Noor, meaning light, because from the darkest place they had ever been, a light had risen, not just for them, but for many others, and that truly was justice. Friend, that brings us to the end of today's story. We hope it touched your heart and made you think. In a world full of silence, speaking up is an act of courage. Let's stand together for truth, for justice, and for those who cannot speak for themselves. If this story meant something to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, Allah Hafez.